Hi everybody. I've been asked quite often to do a video where I go through the template that I use. I'm not sure why this is such a interesting thing for some people, but I get this request all the time. And so I thought I would finally actually put that together and actually sort of go through what my template is, um, and have something to point to when people ask me for that. Before I get started, just a quick little thing that this is not the only way to do a template. I'm sure there's lots of it here that's suboptimal or that I've done in a way that could be better or whatever. If you do yours a different way than I do, more power to you. There's nothing wrong with that. This is just the workflow that's worked for me, and that's allowed me to be as productive as I can be. So let's go ahead and start. So the first thing is I keep everything as much as possible inside of track stacks within Logic. It's just nice to have everything be organized. It also allows you to color code things. So for example, if I open the Winds folder here, you can see that everything in the Winds folder will be green. If I were to record something into, say, these alto flutes, you would get a nice green region here that's nicely named in the right color, which really helps me when I'm looking at the full score to sort of see where things are going to come in and where they aren't. You'll also notice, of course, that I've got Logic's load on demand going because I just got to the point where I had enough libraries in here that it was starting to strain even the servers that I run this off of. And so I just went to that. Also, it's just nice to be able to pop it open and it just immediately opens and you can kind of go from there. The downside is, of course, that when you want to say, oh, I want to, use the penny whistle from Cinewinds here, you kind of have to give it a second. While I'm running this, I should mention that I keep a remote desktop open of the server in question. So for example, here is the Cinewinds. It's running on a Windows server that I have downstairs. One of my most popular videos is that one where I go through the Dell R630s that I run down in the basement. This is one of those. So yeah, it's just loading, Cinewinds, as you can see. Contact. There we go. Contact instance was not started there, but you can see it's just right in here. And typically what I do is I just will load up whatever the default of a patch is. I don't go through and really customize them and try to make them all exactly perfect, because I know that when I get them into a project, I'm going to be changing them anyway. So it's not really worth, going through and really messing around with them on a track by track basis, because there's so many tracks in the template that trying to do that would just take too much time. And I like I said, I do it per track anyway. On any given project, I'm not using, a huge amount of the total tracks, right? If I'm using a flute, I'm probably going to pick one of my flutes, from here, end up using that one, and I'm not going to use, usually another flute. So this is, again, kind of why it's good, I think, to kind of just load on demand. It's just a lot easier. Todd K. Edwards started doing this and was telling me how great it was. And at first I was like, because I've always been a load everything up right at the beginning so you don't have to interrupt your creative flow or whatever kind of person. But I've come to the conclusion that it's a lot easier for me to just have everything here pre-configured but not preloaded. So that's how I do it. I try to keep them in as much orchestral order as possible. I usually, when I'm working on the template, I open up a standard orchestral order on the other monitor over here, just so I can remember exactly what that is. And I try to keep the libraries mostly in a sensible, similar order. For example, Hollywood Winds, then Cinewinds, then BBSSO or BBCSO, then SSO, etc. Which is funny because I'm sure if you're looking at the Winds here, they're just a mess. I have not been keeping them as consistent as the other stuff because I don't use them quite as much. But yeah, so each section of the orchestra is in its own little track folder, which helps me. Additionally, in there are any aux things. So, for example, here's like the reverb for the winds. Like all the winds are getting a send from this reverb. Right now it's spaces. I actually have a version I'm working on of this where I've sort of got different reverbs available. I've always used spaces, so that's kind of what I have in the current template right now, but I'm hoping to kind of expand that. That allows me to just have that right here, and I can, solo it and do all that stuff. Later, when we come to how it's all routed, I'll talk a little bit about how that works in context. So in terms of some synthy stuff, so I found that there's a bunch of libraries that I have now that are based on real instruments, but then they use some sort of like synth component to change a source sample. And for those, especially when they're designed to mimic or really sound like or be based on those real instruments, I put them in these little separate little kind of families called designed, whatever. So in this case, it's designed winds, and we've got, say, Vento. Which is a synth. Here, let me just put that up here. It's a synth that's got, as you can see, it's using real samples, but it's doing all sorts of processing to them. So I consider that a designed track. So that's what I use for that. Again, output analog winds in here. Like if there's any sort of patch that is just ultra unrealistic, that would be impossible to get just raw recording a real instrument, I usually try to put it in the designed section. There's a few changes to that idea, and I'll show you that. That's down on design strings, it gets a little weird, but that's those design things. So like again, here's Forzo from, again, Heaviosity, same idea, using brass samples, but then kind of creating a synth based on them, kind of Omnisphere style. Same idea. And again, we've got analog brass and stuff. I also have put the 8DO. I bought the 66 trombones 8DO library kind of as a joke, because I feel like it's like if there is a sample meme library, it's that one, but I love it. That's not a sound you're going to see in real life, so it goes into designed. So that's what those design things are. And later when I talk about stems, I stem those out separately so that when we go to print stems, they're not messing with the actual orchestral families. Percussion includes all pitched and unpitched percussion. These stem out to pitched and unpitched, and I don't include pianos here. Yeah, I know piano's technically percussion. It's just nice to have another stem of those, and it's nice to keep them in their own folder. So they're in their own keys folder, which I'll look at later. Nothing too crazy, just some Heaviosity. I got these LA Modern ones in here, which are just those Audio Ollie LA Modern percussion patches are fantastic. And then, of course, all pitched percussion is kind of down here. This is a great example of, I promised myself I was going to try to keep everything pretty organized, and just falls apart. At least they're with usually their same sample library developer, but as far as the order of how those developers show up, it kind of gets a little crazy in there. I didn't go through brass, so let's take a look at brass. Again, nothing too crazy. Interesting thing to look at here, this was true in the winds too. We've got ensemble patches on top, so that if I want to do like just sketching with some ensemble stuff, I just keep that up at the top. I almost never use those. I'm not an ensemble patch person. I like to program each instrument individually because I'm a masochist. That's how I do that. And then I've got everything in mostly standard orchestral order here. It gets a little crazy when you get stuff like Abbey Road 1, where it's like a, they have a horns patch, but they also have like a full brass patch. Like, where does that go? Well, it's kind of, there's like a low brass patch down here somewhere, I think. Anyway, I try to keep them as much in orchestral order. when I build my Vienna instances, I do it one instrument per instance. I do not try to mess with, where did that go? I do not try to mess with putting, doing lots of different routing within VE Pro. And the reason why is logic. There's a lot of features in Logic that get really bizarre or are annoying to work with if you're, say, outputting 16 instruments and MIDI channels out one VI track. It's technically more resource efficient to do it that way, but then freezing gets weird, or it doesn't work if you want to do it, and it's just easier for me to just use Vienna Ensemble Pro just like a transparent layer where it's just like loading, contact directly in Logic. Nothing's different. And that means that there is a new instance for every instrument within VE Pro, which again is not the way to go if you're looking for the most efficient use of computing resources. What I do is, that's why I buy those cheap old servers, is that I figure it's probably the cheapest way to have really high-end hardware, and then I just throw hardware at the problem instead of trying to optimize everything. I found once you get to something in the tune of 96 gig of RAM, like, who cares anymore, right? Like, just don't worry about efficiency. I'm not going to be using every single one of these brass instruments at once. It's just not going to happen. I do have a version of this template where I have told it, load everything up when I load the template, and it loads. It gets close. I mean, it uses something in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 gig of RAM across 3 different machines when I do that. But it's not super stable, and things start to pop and click. And it's like, why would I do that? So again, that's another sort of commercial for the load on demand in Logic. So yeah, if there is a patch that is, say, like an A4 patch or an A12 patch, like for example these glorious, where are they? The JXL A12. See if we can not crash sign here. Don't crash sign, please. Don't crash. I just loaded up, sort of near the horns, right? I've got all my individual horns up here, but then I've got the ensembles down here so that you can just have those as it's like an instrument. For a while, I was trying to my template is it's like a orchestral score. I just have horns as a track, horn one, and it's just not the way MIDI works. So I've gone back to this massive, multi-100 track thing where I just have everything in here. So that's how I handle that. It's kind of like Ensemble Patches, but kind of per instrument, but they're then just inside the brass folder. So yeah, percussion. So we got keys in their own folder. I'm currently actually in the process of moving everything that is east-west off of a server that I keep in here. I actually bought a tower server a while ago, or just a tower PC that I was using as a server. Actual server hardware is so cheap now that it's like, why do that? I don't want the noise and stuff, and plus I use it to play games and stuff now, so I don't want sample libraries on it and have it boot into Vienna and all this stuff. So I'm slowly migrating all those samples down to a server. I've been meaning to do a video on this. This is my first attempt to run VE Pro servers in a virtual machine. So far, it's actually been working pretty well for me. So I'll probably do a video on that because I've been surprised at how well that's been working. And I've learned some things along the way, and hopefully I can maybe offer some tips if you're thinking about doing that too. Anyway, back to the template. So we just got all these pianos in here. Again, these are kind of just, I try to keep them close to the same manufacturer together. As you can see, all the Spitfire stuff is together. How great is Spitfire's firewood, by the way? And Colorado represent Lumineers, right? So I think HC Piano is going to get knocked out of here. I didn't realize how big it was. I had bought it actually for, we were looking for a really specific tone on the Discover Hope trailer for that, the Master Chief moment, This is the wrong tone. And I had bought HC piano, Hans Zimmer piano, just to see if we could get a little closer there and offer the developer some more options. I did not realize that library is it's like 200 gig or something insane. So I think this one might leave because I'm running out of SSD space. I do not break out designed pianos, even though I could. Like this Ascend would just be like Ascend pianos. So I keep those in here. Any prepared piano stuff, any organ. I've got just the Spitfire organ in here right now. And then of course I keep the aux channel for the reverb at the end of the folder so that it can be there and I can see it and I can move it around in the mixer. For synths, I have them all in one folder, but I stem them out separately. So what I've got now, what I found it works, is to have pads, ARPs, pulses, basses, perc, and effects, and then those stem out separately in the end when I go to print stems. The one change I might be making to this soon is to have leads kind of be in their own stem. So far, that hasn't really been a problem for me, but right now just having the different kinds of synths kind of close together so that I can kind of keep them nice and isolated has been useful. This is one of the few places where I sort of do the Daniel James approach. Most of these are actually just empty. There's nothing in them. There's no instrument loaded. And I kind of load them on demand as I need a new synth pad, because there's so many synth pads and you want each texture palette of, say, synth pads, for example, to be different for every track for the most part. So I don't want to have things loaded. I have an Omnisphere loaded in the first two just to have Omnisphere ready to go, but it's not, I never use that patch. I just have a generic Omnisphere pad loaded so I can get the instrument up. Omnisphere is the only one of the few VSTs I actually host locally here on the DAW machine. The rest is all somewhere else. So each set of synth families has their own reverb, of course, and as I mentioned, they stem out. I have harps in their own folder. Nothing super exciting about that. Any voice stuff, choirs, is all here. I'm very confused why I am not able to freeze Eric Whitaker soprano. Why does it not have a freeze on it? Huh, I'm gonna have to look at that. But that's where they are. I've got all any choir sample goes here, any solo sample goes here, etc. Guitars are their own their own folder. Nothing super special. Once we get to strings, things get a little bit more complicated, since strings become sort of the foundation of the orchestra. Much like the synths, all the strings live in their own little folder, so that I can hide all this garbage if I need to. But they're stemmed out in high and low, so they stem out violin 1, 2, viola 1 stem, cello, bass, another stem. So I have them switch to high and low strings, and then there's of course separate reverb for them. I tend to try to kind of keep my reverb instances down, so I try to send all the violins through violas through one reverb, all the with Ascend, of course, and then the low stuff, and then kind of tweak as needed. That's just the way I do it because I found it's a lot easier. I don't separate by articulation. I know Christian Henson from Spitfire is really big about keeping your shorts in their own stems and he's probably 100% right. I cannot be bothered to do that. I used to do the track per articulation style of writing or of templating, and I found it just ruined my compositional process. It really, having those separated just messes with my head. I mean, I really do come from a write it down on paper sort of background, and so having violin shorts be a separate instrument from violin longs or legatos just messes with my head, and it causes me to do all these weird things in the composition, and it causes me to be lazy in the composition in ways that create all these impossible it doesn't, for me, that does not work. I can't do it. I know I could stem them out separately still, but I just don't. I don't like it. Again, it's just like, you know, say SSO violin loads on demand through a Vienna instance. Let's see. I think this one's on Hovani's. Yeah. It's just the patch as Spitfire gave it to me. I don't tweak it. It's just loaded. If I want to go in and mess with it, I can do that, you know, if I decide to use it. I try to keep them color coded within Vienna to match the colors in the DAW somewhat successfully. I need to kind of clean that up, but and again, I try to keep them as consistent as possible. You'll notice that Berlin strings forces you into a longs shorts sort of track idea. I don't love this, but my philosophy is keep it as similar to the way the developers sent it to you as possible, so that you can just allow their pre-configuration of the library to sort of take some work away from your compositional process. So since orchestral tools split their longs and shorts, I'll just put them in longs and shorts. It's not my favorite, but I know I could go in and like just put OT Berlin strings violin 1 longs and like make my own custom thing that includes the shorts. But it's like I want to spend as little time as possible screwing around with stuff like that and more time writing music. So if they give it to me like that, that's the way I do it. I've got the Sentry stuff. Sordino's broken out. Again, don't like the articulation being on its own, but that's just the way I've done it. And again, highs and lows. If I have any solo strings, they go next to, you know, their instrument. So for example, BBCSO violin 1 is right here. Then I've got the leader patch like right underneath that so that it's ready to go. You know, right now, as I mentioned, I have my Hollywood strings are currently, I'm moving them around. They're currently blown up. But for example, the solo Hollywood violin would go here, but probably next to Hollywood strings, violin 1. Come on, Spitfire, let's go. Yeah, so, yeah, not a lot of stuff. You know, if there's any, you know, DeVisi patches, I try to keep those together. That's really helpful. Ensemble patches, it's very helpful when ensemble patches are high and low, because I can easily put them into one of these. If there's just a massive full ensemble patch, like say this full ensemble CSS, I just put it at the very top, just like the brass. Yeah, and then there's a design strings folder. Design strings is a little different from the other ones. There are some libraries, for example, Novo, that use like string samples to produce basically what is a synth instrument. So those are in here, but also any sort of string arrangement that's really unorthodox or super processed, I put in here into design strings. So for example, those beautiful Sospiro contact strings are in here because they're just like ultra designed. They're ultra processed. I mean, they're gorgeous. That's such a unique processed sound that I keep them down here in design strings. Hans Zimmer strings gets down here because when are you gonna have 60 cellos? You're not. No, none of us mere mortals can get 60 cellos together for one thing. So those get put down here. Here's where Albion Neo's, beautiful stuff goes. All of these like super. You know what melody from Halo sounds really good with these? Those Cortana chords. They sound so good on that. Lab stuff, their tape strings. By the way, if you have not picked up the free Labs tape strings, go do it now. It's so good. Totally free. So Spiro Full, for whatever reason, is down at the bottom here. Like, this should probably actually be at the top. Whatever. Abbey Road 1, full ensemble. Any analog strings, patches here. This is where I put things like this guy, the 8DO. Where is he? Does he live on Havanas? Yeah, he lives here. That 8DO custom instrument. Because it's a custom instrument. It's only ever going to exist in samples, so it's here in design strings because it's literally designed. Again, reverb and effects. So that's kind of the general layout of the template. At the top, I have got a blank playback track that has no input or output because I heard one time that this increases performance to have this selected while playing back. I don't know if that's still true or ever was true, but it's just it's a ritual I do, so I always have that there. This is a custom click track if I want to do, like, say we're in like 7/8. I did a 7/8 piece that got recorded, and you know, the 3+4, 4+3, 2+2+3, 2+3+2. It was really, really a mess to work with in the session. And what I should have done is I should have worked up my own click track that matched the beat patterns in that 7/8 piece. So that's just here so I can do that. There's also a sketch track here that's just Cinepiano without any effects on it. The Cinepiano later is all, you know, nicely placed and volume balanced. This one's just for if I want to, you know, screw around and work on some ideas up here. This is useful as like a guide track to, like, you know, maybe plot out the whole piece and kind of orchestrate it underneath. So underneath that, underneath design strings, we have some spacers here. These are just spacer tracks. They don't go anywhere or do anything. They're just there to keep these nice and separate. We have sort of the aux tracks where all of those families come to. So they all route down to one of these. So for example, winds route down to this wind stem. And I just have them in the project because Logic does not let you, that I am aware of, order things on the mixer without there being a track in the arrange window. So these are just here to keep the order straight. You'll see it's just the same families. And it's their aux, which is nice because I can throw on any sort of effect or plugin that I want to apply to, like, say, all the high strings or all the low strings or all the synth pads or all the winds. I can just do it here. And then those route out to audio tracks, which are my prints. So prints for click, prints for winds, prints for all the stems. And then finally, everything sums down to the full mix track, where if we're going to apply any sort of mastering stuff, you know, I usually don't do that, but, you know, it's all here if I want to. And then that, of course, prints out to the full mix print. So when it's time to make stems, I can just grab, you know, say this entire print folder, record, enable it, and print stems, which is nice. Printing stems in Logic is actually surprisingly annoying at times. I'm not sure why I can't just, like, there should be like a file export stems. Like, there sort of is. You can do it by track, but like things get weird and it's really buggy, and I've had a lot of trouble with that. You can also do it by regions. We want those to be off. These prints don't actually go anywhere. If you look at them in the mixer, they actually don't output, so you don't get the doubling. I forgot to do that in the original version of this. I'm like, why does this sound awful? Oh, it's just doubling, you know, everything's... Anyway. So that's that. And so then when you're done, inside your project folder, there's an audio files folder that has all your prints once you've printed out. And so you can, like, you know, copy those into version 1, version 2, version 3. Speaking of versions, I do use the Logic Project Alternatives feature, which is really nice. Right now, there's no alternative for this. There's just, you know, nothing. So I have one that's just labeled start here. As I work through it, you know, I can have version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And so that way I keep all the version history nice and clean and inside this. It's a really nice feature. It kind of sucks because each version is really actually a full separate project, I think, because if you want to switch versions, say you're on version 3 and you don't like it and you want to go back to version 2, switching back to version 2 is the same as if you had, like, you know, save as'd. which is a little annoying. I would love to see some work on the project alternatives where we could be a little bit more fluid about switching between them, because especially like with this template, like most of these instruments are not changing between versions except for maybe synths. And even then, it's not like I'm usually not deleting synth instruments between it. So it would be nice to see like not needing to reload the whole project basically to change the versions. But so yeah, that's it. I've stripped out as much of the UI as I find useful. I keep the arrangement marker, signature tempo stuff up here. I usually actually don't use this arrangement track. I could probably get rid of it. But I definitely use tempo, of course, and signature. I work in media, so everything should look like it's in C. So other than time signatures, that doesn't really change. Markers are super useful. As far as my transport, this is my preferred version of the transport. I know other people like other things. This is what I like to do. I've got some hidden tracks in here, in case I ever want to, like, say, pull. What does that hide? I think that hides the. What does that hide? Yeah, this is some spacers that are just there so that when, so I can space things out if I want to. So, for example, here's a spacer between each family. That's what I use that for the most part. But yeah, I found this to be really effective, really useful. It saves me a lot of time. It keeps everything nice and organized, especially with having all the stemming done for me. I've spent a lot of time trying to build sort of the ultimate stemming template where all of the effects are stemmed out separately. All of the articulations are stemmed out separately. Everything is really super wide and deep and separated. And I've just come to the conclusion that like this simple, just like orchestral families, high-low strings, pitch down, pitch percussion. It's just a lot easier for me to work with. Other people don't like this. Like when I stemmed out stuff for big clients, sometimes I'll ask for a lot of separation, and then I just do it by hand, which takes forever and is a pain. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of my template. So that's how I've organized things. Again, I'm sure I'm going to get 100 comments of you can do it better this way and this way and this way and this way, and that's probably 100% true. I don't feel offended if I don't change it, because even if you're right and you're like down there telling me something's better, this is just the way that I work, and I can't be bothered to screw around with messing with a lot of other stuff, because I just need it to work, and this works. So, and anyway, that's the template. I'm sure we'll be referring all the people who asked me to walk through it to this video. So we'll be putting up some new music soon, I'm sure, and see you later.